Hello, testing 1, 2, just making sure you can see me and hear me okay. Welcome to another Monday Guitar Motivation. We're going to be talking more about bends, and we're actually going to finish up our discussion today as well. So let me check out the chat here. Copy that link. Let's see. Now, I'm not sure. How you doing, Simon? Let's see here. Simon is here. Lord Shader is here. Now, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this on Facebook, but there is a link that you can click on. Let's see if that goes. I don't think that goes to the Facebook groups. No, it's so weird. Oh, maybe it did go to the Facebook group. So that link that I just posted in there to some of the Facebook groups anyway, if you can click on that link, what it does is it allows then your name to pop up on the screen, which certainly helps. Lawrence is here. How you doing? Phil is here. Andrew is here. Very cool. Brian is here. Awesome. I can see, and Brian, I can see your name on there now, which is awesome. Let's see, who else do we have here? RD is here. Michael Bay, of course, is here from the UK. Not as sunny as in Kindred. Yeah, today we've got a nice day today, which is really nice. Looking forward to a little warmer weather around here and a little less wet. We've had flooding and all kinds of stuff, so finally getting better around here. Rob is here. How you doing? Mark is here. Tom is here. Michael Reed is here. Rory is here. Duke 494949 is here. Sean is here. Ken is here. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. Tom is here. We already have a ton of people here, so I won't do this for too long. Joe is here. RC Pete is here. Jamie is here. Very cool. Michael Kelly is here from New Jersey. RJ is here. How you doing? Yuha is here from Finland. I hope I said that right. Marty is here. Marty Davis is here. Very cool. Danny is here from Indiana. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Gord, Jason from Germany. St. Eugene is here. Martin Welch is here. Brent is here. Thank you. Kate is here. How you doing, Kate? Dave is here. Dave Pierce. Vicky is here. David777. Shields is here. Jason is here. Leslie is here. Jambu Lingham is here. Melody is here from Germany. How you doing? Thank you so much for being here. Sean says, are you still coming to town for Gearfest? Well, if Gearfest is online this year, I was all about going to Gearfest, but I hear it's just online. So I don't think so. But I certainly have all plans to still get out to Sweetwater too. I gotta get out. I gotta see some of you. So Igor is here from Mexico City. Dan is here. Nahid is here. Michael, David Locke is here. Very cool. So today I got all kinds of fun stuff to talk to you about in terms of string bending. Try and get you a little more creative stuff that you can do with some of the fundamental things that we've talked about up to this point. Vicky is here. Thank you for being here, Vicky. Joe, Rich K, Maverick is here. Kogu is here. Dan is here. Damon is here from Niagara Falls. Very cool. Jack is here. Nice to see you, Jack. Josh is here. Steve is here. Let's see. Nashanth is here. Hopefully I said that right. Tumasang is here. Tumi. Yep, Tumi. That's right. David is here from Memphis. Very cool. So, all right. Thank you, everybody. We already have a ton of people here. Thank you so much for hanging out. Phil McKnight said they're going to have booths at Gearfest also. So I'll have to look into that because I'm not sure. I would love to come out. I would love to see Phil again. It's been a little while as well. So, all right. So let's go ahead and get started today. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be finishing up our discussion on bending and vibrato. And what I want to give you today are some things that really kind of make your bending sound really, really cool, more authentic. And so what we've talked about is fundamental things. We've talked about like the 3 main whole step bends. Some of those things, okay? And so what we want to do today is start attaching on to that with some really unique things that you can do if you start messing around with this stuff, okay? So what we're going to do here, let's see here. Austin is here. How you doing, Austin? Good to see Austin from Moorhead. I know Austin. Very cool. So what we're going to start off with here is just a couple things that we've talked about before, but I want to make sure we know this before we move into the next thing. So the big thing was whole step bends, and we talked about how those can connect to other strings. We talked about that the last time prior to Memorial Day. How we could connect either in unison, we could connect on the left side, or we could connect on the right side. okay, and get those kind of harmony sounding bends. And we talked about how we could move those around the fretboard and do them in different places, right? We talked about some of that stuff. So what I want to talk to you about first with the whole step bends, then we'll get into all these other bends that you can do, is understanding that when you do a bend, you can do a lot of repetition with that bend. And I did touch on this, but I want to make sure you really understand this, because there's a lot of things that you can do with a bend to make it sound vocal, right? So I could take a bend, for instance, maybe I'm doing this bend right here. And see, I could make it into a repetitive idea by doing it over and over and over again. Or I could do it backward. I could reverse it and go that way. Hey, Daniel. Hey, Sra from Denmark. Very cool. So always remember that with the bend, it's not that you're just doing the bend. We've talked about how important it is to bend in tune, right? Very important. And then learning how to add a vibrato onto a bend, which is really important. But we also talked about how escaping from a bend is really important, like being able to bring the bend back down and then go somewhere, or bend it up and then attach onto a string. Learning how to escape from that bend is really important. Well, now the thing I want to talk to you about is understanding that the bend itself can be really manipulated to do a lot of different things. Hey, Mike. Mike is here from Wales. Mark Ferguson from Phoenix. How you doing, Mark? Okay, so what I like to do a lot of times is I'll do a bend and then I'll take that bend and I'll kind of coerce it into doing something else. Right, so right there I'm bending it up, I'm bringing it back just a little bit, and then I'm adding a wide vibrato. Does the string gauge have an effect on technique? 1,000,000%. If you have super, super thick strings on your guitar, it's going to be a lot harder to do a lot of the things that I'm talking about. But some people like really thick strings. If you have really, really thin strings, it makes all this stuff really easy, but it depends on your hand strength too and the way that you like to play. So you got to find a balance. We talked about this before too. Like if you're just doing rhythm stuff and you're always playing power chords and that's all you do, you could put pretty thick strings on there and you'd be fine. Some people like to have a little bit thinner string when you start getting into doing, solos and different things like that. You just have to find what feels the best to you. That's the most important thing about string thickness, is finding the string size that really fits you best. So again, back to this. So what I call these are repetitive bends. Repetitive bends are any time that I want to keep reiterating the same point. And I can speed up and slow down the speed or the size of the bend or whatever it is I'm doing. But I love those what I call dip bends, where I'll play the bend, I'll dip down, and then I'll come back and then go into a regular kind of maybe aggressive vibrato or repetitive bend if you think about it. Because a vibrato really is like a repetitive bend, right? It's just once it gets to a certain size, it's really no longer a vibrato anymore. Maybe, right? It becomes more of like a bend. Let's see here. Give me just a second here to take a look at this. That right there, we kind of don't want to be posting that sort of thing, so I don't know who that is, but Miss Michelle, yeah, sorry, Miss Michelle. So we'll take her out of there. Goodbye. Yeah, we don't really need to worry about that. So anyway, so here we go. So learning how to do that repetitive idea, really getting in there and being able to and sometimes what's really nice to do is, are chords harder to keep in tune with thinner strings, Rich? Rich says, yes, they sure are. You got to be, well, I mean, being in tune, if you stretch them out properly, they're not going to go out of tune, but you have to be careful with the way you play the strings, because if you hit them too hard, oftentimes you might put them out of tune a little bit, okay? But what I hope you're noticing is, as I'm doing this, let me switch over to this right here. So as I'm doing these, you can make a lot of different sounds by just exploring that idea. So we're going to get into a bunch of different things here, but I just want you to think about that. You can repetitively do the same thing over and over and over, and you can change up, again, the depth of what you're doing. You can change up the speed. You can change up the size, whatever it is that you're doing, okay? So think about that a little bit. Hey, Josh, glad you're here, bud. So the next thing is what I refer to as a siren bend, which for me, being a Kiss fan, this was like an Ace Frehley thing. So what Ace would do is he'd do his bend, and then he'd do these things where he'd do the bend and then he'd do this big wide, again, if you want to call it a bend or vibrato or whatever it is you want to call it, that's what he would do. And it was really cool. And a lot of times when he would do that, he'd be doing it in rhythm with what the song is, right? So think about that a little bit too, that when you're doing these bends, you can do them outside of the rhythm, okay? Or you can do them with the rhythm. Ba-da-da-da-da-da, right? You can go in tandem with the rhythm of the song as well. So there's some really neat things that you can do with that, okay? So that's what a siren bend is a siren bend. Again, these are just made up terms that I'm giving you, but a siren bend for me was like that Ace Frehley thing where he'd do like a really... like that, okay? So you can always keep them really subtle. You know, that sort of thing. So that's our whole step stuff. So we're going to move away from that now, and now I'm going to start giving you all kinds of different little things to think about. So the next really big one, I don't remember if we talked about it or not, but it's a half-step bend. Now, a half-step bend is 1 fret, and half-step bends are really, really important because they sound a little bit different. But in order to play half-step bends, of course, we have to be doing something more than just pentatonic. So let's say, again, I'm going to switch over my camera here. So let's say I was doing A minor pentatonic, and I added in this note right here, which we would call the 9th or the 2nd. So what's really nice about that note right there is, of course, it's next to one of our whole step bends that we normally do. So we've got it sitting right here on the 7th fret, and it bends up to the 8th fret. And it sounds really nice on its own. You know, you could play this. And we're going to talk about that in just a second as well, some other tactics. But right now, just the actual technique of it is the half-step bend itself. So I'm bending the 7 to the 8. And you'll notice when I do that half-step bend, it's very melodic. Like, that's the beauty of adding more notes to your pentatonic scale. Again, not that makes it better. It just gives you more options. Like, for me, if you've ever heard me talk about with soloing and stuff, it's all about diversity. Like, when you're playing, you want dynamics, dynamic diversity. So if you're playing something pentatonic, that's great. But then when you come in with that half-step note, it sounds really, really nice because you haven't used it so much prior. You've been playing more pentatonic, and so when that note comes in, it sounds really nice. What I like to do is maybe play that 8, and then I'll bend to the 7 to the 8, okay, which again, we're going to talk about in just a second, but I do that kind of stuff a lot when I play. So I might just go to the bend, which is fine, but I like to play, and then that note, of course, the octave of that is sitting right down here on the 4th fret of the 3rd string. So a half-step bend. Now, the half-step bend could come from somewhere within the scale, right? The notes of the actual scale where you've got a half step, that's a great place to do it. Half steps can also come from places that aren't necessarily proper in terms of the scale too. So we're going to talk about that as well at the end of this thing. So I've got this all charted out so it all makes sense. So we did whole steps, now we're dealing with half step bends. And in order to have a half step, you need to be able to add a note into your pentatonic. If you know diatonic, you can do this anywhere. But again, the 9th always sounds really, really nice, if you know what that is. Or if you're doing like, you know, a minor 6th. You'll hear me do that all the time in my solos where I'll do that minor 6. Okay, and I'll do that little half step bend. Hello from Spain. I'm so glad you're here. Okay, so half step bend's really, really pretty sounding. Very, very important. Okay, so that's what a half step bend is. Okay, the next thing we've got is a 3-fret bend. So we did whole step bends, and we talked about for the last couple of weeks all these different things we can do with whole step bends, connecting to strings, different kinds of things like that. Today we've talked about how whole step bends can be repetitive, right? And so can any bend for that matter, okay? But now what we're doing is we're moving into half step bends. Well, the next thing we've got is 3-fret bends. So instead of a whole step bend, you're actually bending it up a step and a half. And this is a really nice thing to do on the root, but you can do it on other notes as well. But let's say, for instance, let me switch over my camera again. Let's say I was in A, minor pentatonic again, or diatonic, doesn't matter. Here's my A. So here's my A up here. So right up here at the 10th fret of the second string is an A. Okay? Now, that A, in order to play the next note, would be C, pentatonically, A to C, which is a step and a half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that A note, and it's always nice to remember that your root can always be bent a step and a half. So I can take that A, and it bends up 3 frets, so we're going from 10 to 13. And you could bend any, you can bend other notes too, but I'm just saying a nice place to start to learn how to do a whole step bend is on that root. If we think about like a Hotel California, being in B minor, we hear this, that kind of sound, right? It's a whole step and a half, 3-fret bend is what it is. And it sounds really, really, really cool when you do those. So you can do them anywhere where, like, let's say you were playing something, let's say we're more diatonic, if you know your diatonic scale. So if I was in A right here, I'm just playing A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. So right here I got a B. I could bend that B up a half step to C, but I could bend that half step up to D. See? So I've got this, that's my note. So, and again, bending it with your first finger is pretty tough, but you could head over here to the third finger. So if you know your scales, larger than pentatonic, half step bends really anywhere where you've got a half step bend. 3-fret bend can happen anywhere where you've got yourself a minor third, right? So that's just something to think about a little bit as you play. And you don't have to do it like with your first finger. You can always, decide what fingers you want to use. A lot of times when I do these bends, you'll notice I'm using 3 fingers to do them, but it just depends. It depends on what I'm doing. But okay, so learning how to do the half step bend, the whole step bend, and then the 3-fret bend. Simple way of thinking about it, if you're basically doing pentatonic, if you go to A and you just add in this one note right here, right there's a great place to do it. It's just on that 7th fret bending to the 8. Again, if you're new to this stuff and you're just doing pentatonic, a 3-fret bend, a great place to do that is anywhere you have the root. But the thinner the strings are, obviously the easier it's going to be. If you're down here, you can totally do them there. It just takes a little more effort. But to come up here is a great place to be able to do that, okay? So the next thing we've got is what's called the blues bend. Now, the blues bend is a really great bend that is unique in that what it is the way I try and explain it is when you're, thank you very much, Lance. I appreciate that. Lance, I love your channel. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Richard. Thank you for the kind words. So what we're doing here is if we were on a note, so we're sitting on this note. Let me switch my camera again so you can see this. So if we're sitting on this note, and I want to do a blues bend, what works really well with this is right before I'm ready to leave and go somewhere else. what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull that string just a tiny little bit toward the floor, and then I'm going to leave. So what happens here is, let me play you a phrase and kind of show you this. So I'm not doing this, and it's not even, like a blues bend isn't really even a half step. It's just a little musical twist of that. Like that. And so what I don't want to do is do it right away and then hold it, because it's going to be out of tune, you see? What I want to do is right before I'm ready to leave and go somewhere, is right there. And it doesn't have to be this note. I mean, I could go and do it right there. So it doesn't matter how long I'm on the note. I might be on that note just for a little bit. I might be on the note for a long time. It doesn't really make any difference. The big thing is right before I'm ready to leave, I just give that bend a little bit of a twist, and then I head off. And you get this really great little blues sound. Right? And you can even do the little twist, the little blues bend, and then just be done. You just do this little push, and then you're out of there. So you don't want to hold it. That's the big thing, is don't go, because then it's going to be out of tune. Just stay where you are, and then push it just a little bit, and you've got your blues bend. And you combine that with your vibrato or the other bends that you're doing, and you can see how you really just get this really wonderful language. There's all kinds of different things you can do, and this blues bend can happen on any note. Doesn't make any difference. You can do it anywhere you want. Just very subtle. And so remember, what you're kind of dealing with here as we get into some of these other bending tactics is that it has more to do with how it sounds than whether or not it's perfectly in tune. Now, obviously, some things that we do need to be perfectly in tune. But if I'm doing, like we talked about the ghost bend, if I'm doing like that kind of thing, all that other stuff in between there is out of tune, for the most part, right? But it's the effect that's happening. Am I muting it with my pick? No. I mean, I mute the strings all the time with my hands and my guitar pick to keep things quiet. And sometimes when I'm picking, I might use a palm mute or something like that in there, but so it kind of depends. But that's aside from what these bends are doing. But yeah, okay. So if that makes sense. So now we've got whole step bends, we've got half step bends, we've got 3-fret bends, and now we've got this new unique thing called a blues bend, which isn't really in tune. It's just this little thing that you do at the end. Now, let me get to this part, because this is what I really love to do too, is I'll take that blues style bend and I'll start doing these, what I'll call a wrist twist. And what I do is when I'm playing, I'll do these things where I go, okay? Donald said, reminds me of Gary Moore. All this stuff is very Gary Moore. I loved Gary Moore. So you'll see what I'm doing is, it's not a half-step bend, it's not a blues bend, it's just a little push of the string that's causing the string to kind of go out of tune and then come back in tune. And I can do that in time, but I can also do that kind of randomly, which is what I like to do. And I'll get these little kind of random things. Now, I can always smooth it out with a nice, easy, vibrato or whatever, which is fine. But sometimes I'll come across a note. And I'll do something like that. Hey, Eddie. Eddie's here from Scotland. How you doing, bud? So if that makes sense, that's the wrist twist bend, which is just a little random thing that's kind of like a blues bend. It's kind of like a half-step bend, but I'm not concerned with it being in tune. The idea of it is that it's just giving this crazy little random kind of sound. And after I do something like that, it might be nice to resolve it back to something that's a little more straightforward. And then maybe go to a blues bend or whatever it is that I'd like to do, okay? So that's the next thing. Now let's talk about using some of these ideas to connect around the fretboard. So one thing that I like to do, and you'll see me do this a lot, is I'll play a note, and then what I'll do is bend to the same note. Now, that's what I was just talking about before. Let me switch my camera angle here. So for instance, if I play this 8, I'll then bend to the 8. And I do that a lot where I'll play a note and then I'll bend to that same note. So I might do... Right? So you play some note, whatever it is, and then you'll bend to that. So it's like reiterating the same note twice, but instead of doing, which is kind of boring, you simply bend to that note. And you could do this like all over the fretboard. Like I might start up here and go... You see, so now I'm playing a scale as I move down. Let me switch back here. So now I'm playing a scale as I'm moving, right? And I don't have to do them all. I can do whichever ones I want, right? But the point is that it's available to you. Now you'll notice I'm doing a lot of bending with my first finger, which does take a little while to get used to. You don't have to do that, but I'm just, as I'm moving down the fretboard, I can do that anywhere I want. So half step bends, whole step bends, 3-fret bends, blues bends, and all the repetition that goes with any of those things. Now what we're doing is we're looking at these kind of quirky things like a wrist twist style bend, blues bend, kind of different. And now we're connecting. So now I'm showing you how I would play a note and then I would connect it. So I'd play a note and then bend to that same note. You don't have to do that, but it's something to think about, because instead of just going, which is perfectly fine, there's nothing wrong with that, but if you went, you can see the difference is you've already established that note in somebody's brain, and then you're reiterating it by playing it again. So something really cool that you can do with that. The next thing is, let's see, a bend to a bend. Now this is kind of fun and it takes a little while to get used to, but think about this. If I was on the note B right here, let me switch back. If I was on the note B and I wanted to bend up to C, it's a half step. And then if I want to bend from up to D, it'd be another whole step. So I could go... So I could bend up a half step and then bend up a whole step from there. Okay? Or if I was on the note A, I could bend up a whole step to B, and then just simply kick it up again. It's going to become a 3-fret bend. And it sounds really neat. So instead of going, I can go. See that? Okay. With the pinch harmonics, will lighter strings sound better? I don't think so. I think it depends on what you like to play. It doesn't. I don't know that pinch harmonics are better on lighter strings. I mean, Zach plays pretty heavy strings and he does pinch harmonics all the time. So I think it just kind of depends, Lance. Now, notice how I could just go from this half step to this whole step. But I could also dip. See how I can bend it up and then bring it back down and then go up to my step and a half. So half step or whole step and then half step, right? So here's my whole step. And then I can dip it down and come back up. So you can do something like that, or you just slide into it. Just go from your whole step to your 3-fret. And you could just come back down back down to this note. See, so there's lots of really neat things that you can do with these bend-to-bend ideas, these other connections. So give you a couple more, and I want to take all your day here, just a couple more. Okay, the next thing I love to do is a bend to a slide. So let me show you that real quick, okay? And then I'll let you get out of here. So I'll do a bend, for instance, and again, not an established whole step bend or something, just maybe something where I go, where I'm bending it up, and then right away what I'm doing is I'm bringing it back down and I'm doing a slide. See that? So I'm going. Now, the slide can happen when I'm on top, or the slide can happen when I bring this back down. It just depends on what feels best to you. See that? So now I could bend it, you know, have an established bend, and then move into that, which normally what I would do is I probably wouldn't bring it all the way down and then slide. And sometimes it's just a little bit of a subtle bend that I then do the slide right afterwards. So you're going to notice that as you get into these things, it takes a little while to get comfortable with understanding that it has more to do with the feel and the sound than it does necessarily the fundamental bending of it. Although that is important, we know that. You see? So I love to do things like that too, where I'll be doing a bend and then I'll go into the slide. And I'll combine all these things together as I'm playing in just different places across the fretboard. So we've got playing the note and then bending to that same note. We've got bend to bend, those things. And now we've got bend to slide, okay? Another one I love to do are up or down the board bending. So I might do something where I go, and what I'm doing there is I'm bending up the proper, as best I can, the proper amount each time, okay? Again, relative to the scale. So this would be a whole step, half step, whole step, and then end with my whole step, right? And they don't have to be a ton of them. You know, you might just do a couple, or you know, you might skip one or something like that, but thinking about that, something like that. And you could do those going back down too, although it's a little bit harder when you go. But you could certainly do those. I tend to do them moving up this way more when I do that, okay? But that's another thing you can do, is just up the board or down the board bends. And then the last thing I want to give you, and then I'm going to let you out of here, is what I'll just call generically exotic bends. So this is going back to what I talked about with the half-step bends. I mentioned how you could do a half-step bend if you were in a scale, whatever scale you're in, and you just find a half-step and you can bend the note in front, half-step higher, of course, and you're doing a half-step bend. But with exotic bends, what I do a lot is I'll play a note that isn't part of the scale, right? And I'll get that kind of sound. And you get that kind of a cool little Marty Friedman-ish kind of sound, right? So what's happening here is all I'm doing is choosing two notes. Like here, I'm playing the 7 and the 9. And what I'm doing is going to the 8 in between and bending it up a half step. So because it starts on a note that isn't a 7 or a 9, it sounds a little bit more what we'll call exotic. And then you're bending it up to become this note, like we talked about with the half-step bends. So it really is a half-step bend. It's just bending from a note that doesn't exist within the context of your scale. And what I'll do a lot with those notes to make them sound a little more Marty Friedman-ish is I'll do the little, which we've talked about before, but I'll do the little reverse bend. And then I'll bring it back up. See that? Yeah, if you're getting captions, I think you can shut those off, because I'm not in control of captions. So if you're getting captions, you can certainly shut those off. Okay, so at least I hope you can. Anyway, so that's a really neat sound that you can do too. And you can do multiple kind of, you know, different kinds of bends like that. to get different kinds of sounds, unique sounds by doing that. So to recap and then let you go, we've got whole step bends, we've got 3-fret bends, we've got half step bends, we've got blues bends, and then we've got all of these various different kinds of connection things like the wrist twist bend, play a note, then bend to it, bend to bend, which was the half step, whole step, or whole step, half step, bend to slide, up the board bends, exotic bends, just a ton of different things that you can try and explore. Now remember, if you're looking for any guitar information, head over to guitarzoom.com, check out my guitar courses. You know, we have a membership, all that sort of thing. And lastly, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for taking time out to hang out with me, and hopefully this stuff helps you. If it does, like and share it with somebody else. And just have a great week, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon, okay?